A very gracious introduction. I don't really have slides to present today. I didn't get an opportunity to work on them. It's a little embarrassing to see my face plastered here. That's okay. Firstly, thank you. Thanks for the invite. And this is not a very technical talk. What I'll try and attempt to do is recount the journey of our organization, Zerodha, and how we built it, how we built tech using FOSS, Postgres heavily, obviously, over the last decade. So Zerodha is a financial services organization. We are a stockbroker. In fact, we are India's largest stockbroker today. And Zerodha Tech, the tech team that builds all the products and services, was founded 10 years ago. So this is really the 10th year. And we had the, I would say, privilege and luck of being able to start everything from the absolute scratch. So in 2013, when the idea of building a tech team at Zerodha, a financial services firm, came about, it was an industry that really had no technology going. There weren't any quality consumer products in the capital markets or finance industry, and to me as a developer, as a hobbyist, that felt like a gold mine. Whatever you attempted would be brand new, and it was a green field for experimentation. So in the very initial days, the absolute initial days, the trajectory of the tech team was really not defined. I'd go sit with people, understand their roles, let's say support people or somebody who was working on compliance, understand their manual processes and try and write little Python scripts to automate them. So processes that would take, let's say, 2 hours of juggling Excel sheets suddenly started taking 2 seconds. And that really defined the rest of the journey for us. There were no plans to build any sort of technology, specific technology, or any products or services or platforms. So it really evolved from there. In late 2013, I still remember we set up Postgres 9.3, I think it was, our first self-hosted database, and we started writing financial records to it. That was really, truly the beginning of the creation of financial technology at Zerodha. And Postgres factors heavily into whatever we do. Today we run nodes that span tens of terabytes, hold hundreds of billions of rows of financial records, and we install, maintain, and run these databases ourselves. So the focus of my talk here is that self-hosting, picking amazing open source technologies, self-hosting them. When I say self-host, you get bare bones infrastructure, you install a certain piece of technology, you study it, you learn it, you grow and scale it, and then you master it. You do all of this without external help. That's not to say that one should never take external help. That's just to say that it's possible, and that's how we've done it. So that's how Zerodha as a tech company really began, with a bunch of Python scripts and a Postgres database in 2013. And I clearly remember picking Postgres 9.3 or 9.4, I can't recollect now, as an experiment, because up until that point, at least, the perception was that Postgres was a largely experimental database, not really fit for prime time. And this was 10 years ago. But it was a bet, and as I said, it has paid off beautifully. So as we started growing as an organization, we had, when this happened, I think we had 5,000 users. Today, we have 11 million users. And the stack has grown organically to serve a really large scale. So 11 million users who avail financial services from our platforms. And every morning when stock markets open, we have like 2+ million users who log in within a span of, let's say, 10 or 15 seconds. So we handle huge amounts of concurrency and real-time traffic. We have Redis instances that have been running for like 4 or 5 years with zero maintenance. These things just run. And databases that serve hundreds of thousands of requests every second, again, with practically zero manual intervention. So this didn't happen in one day. All of this have been really built up over the last decade. So I'd like to share an overview of the tech stack that we run to paint a reasonably accurate picture of how seriously we take the idea of self-hosting. And just to cite some numbers, we don't really have any IT vendors. We don't really have any SaaS subscriptions. We practically pay 0 rupees or $0 to external vendors for any sort of subscription or help or maintenance systems. And we don't use any managed services from any providers. We use AWS, for instance, to host our applications, but as an infrastructure provider, all the databases of which we have dozens and dozens today, all the running database instance, none of these are managed services. Again, that's not to say that managed services are bad. It's just to say that this is how we've been doing it, and it works for us. So as the organization started growing, we had, like I said, we had one Postgres database, and we were automating processes. Suddenly people understood the sweetness of automation, nothing to do with technology, stuff that was taking 2 hours now would take 2 seconds, so people wanted more. And that's when we realized that, we were building a tech team. Then we hired our first engineer. This was in 2013. So the two of us started working on these things, picking up open source tools, whatever was ideal for the task at hand. We'd pick up the tool, we'd use it, we'd abuse it, we'd host it. And we were a bootstrapped organization, so it wasn't, it probably would not even have been prudent to think of expensive managed services. So the team grew, the organization grew, the business grew very, very slowly, 2013, 14, and management was kicked in. So in the early days, I remember there was one Gmail inbox into which a dozen people would log in. That was a support ticketing system. That would work if you only had a few hundred or a few thousand clients, but once we crossed that threshold, suddenly we needed a support ticketing management system. So I remembered OS tickets. It's a PHP-based system. It still exists. I had played around with it in 2005-06. I remembered that. I went back and I picked it up, and we installed it and set it up in 2014 as a support ticketing system. And that's the same instance that is running today, 10 years later. And we have 1,000 people, employees, who log in every single day. We handle millions and millions of support tickets that come in from millions of clients. And it's the same old PHP system that rarely changes. It runs on an EC2 instance, which costs peanuts. So the amount of money we spend on the technical infrastructure to handle millions of clients and hundreds of millions of support tickets over the last many years is practically zero. And I know that there are a lot of SaaS offerings today where customer support agents are charged per user, per seat, per year. And I've done simple math and back of the napkin comparisons, and just the most popular service, if you would use that would cost us several $1 million every year. We spend a few $100s every year on this. And this is a system that requires virtually no maintenance. It's been running for 10 years. We've upgraded the server and the necessary resources from time to time, but that's it. And there's no fear. There's no fear anymore because we've self-hosted and built that confidence. So that was one of the first systems that we, internal user systems that we installed and ran, the support ticketing system. And then as we grew, suddenly we needed messaging and communication. So we've gone through many different systems, but today I think we're using Mattermost, but we used many systems in the past. You pick up, install it, use it, roll it out to your employees. Zerodha today has around 1,100 employees. Our tech team is still really tiny, 30 people. But the support team is really large, 600 people. So every single thing that we roll out is for a large user group. And 1,000 people log into these systems almost every day. Then in around 2016, our employee count was growing, we were growing, our support team was growing, and we need HR management. At that point, our HR team was managing, let's say, leave requests on Excel sheets and payroll on, whatever disjoint rudimentary systems. So we suddenly needed a proper organizational management system, and we found ERP Next in 2016. We picked it up, we installed it, and today ERP Next is used heavily in the organization. Even our accounts that span into tens of millions of financial records per day is also on ERP Next. It's an ERP system, open source system, built in India, based out of Mumbai. So even the employee management system, payroll, leave, HR stuff, is self-hosted and self-managed. It's the same tech team, let's say the 30 of us, who build and run and maintain the consumer-facing apps and the financial technology that also is in charge of installing and maintaining the HR systems. Now, we don't really see a distinction here, and I'm often asked this question: why would you waste time on stuff that isn't core to your business? Why would you want to waste any time setting up and installing and tuning an HR or payroll system when you could be building financial technology? I've realized over the last many years that it's a myth, because after a certain point of growth in organizations, HR and employee management becomes as critical as, let's say, the product that you're offering. If you're unable to function properly internally, then that will immediately start reflecting on your finances, on your offerings, on your customer support, everything. So the tight control over the quality and the workflows we've had internally, even in building systems for our employees, heavily factors into the services that we are able to offer today as an organization. And it's a myth to draw arbitrary distinctions between systems and technologies, such as your people systems internally or your end user offerings, which could be completely different. They all intersect at some point, and that point is different for different organizations. So that's been our lesson. And coming back to our technology stack, we never really had a plan to build a trading platform. It sounds ironic because a financial services company has to offer an investment or trading platform. That's the primary offering. But our trajectory was so organic that it wasn't even a part of our trajectory in the beginning. 2015 is when we realized that the financial services that we were offering, for them to be meaningful and fruitful, we had to offer our own investment platforms, like well-designed consumer technology. That is when we started working on our on Kite. That's our investment platform that we offer. And that really defined the rest of the journey for us, for not just for Zerodha as a financial services company, but for the tech team. That is when we started doing, I wouldn't say real technology, maybe I would have said that in the past, all technology is real. That is when we started diving deep into technology as a first-hand practice. At this point, we started writing systems from scratch. We started evaluating a large number of technologies, which slowly spanned things that we never imagined. Then, at a certain point, once we had our software, we started offering it. Performance was a consideration, so we built all our earlier systems in Python. And we soon ran into big stumbling blocks and bottlenecks with Python. So we picked up Go. This was again around late 2014 and 15. And Go became a primary component in our stack. Even today, all our high concurrency, high traffic systems are written in Go. And when you trade on Kite, our trading platform, most requests, so we have a baseline, most requests finish in less than 50 milliseconds. But many of these requests, a significant chunk, it's hitting, let's say, Postgres database, which is still in the hot path, or many instances of Redis. So 2015, 16, and 17, when we were really growing, when our consumer offerings were growing, suddenly we started running into issues of management. People management is one thing, but when your software technology stack grows, you have to start spending time to write software to manage software. You have to do infrastructure planning, code as infrastructure. All of those headaches really start kicking in. And this is an area where one has to be really careful, because today, especially after containers came into the foray, there are countless offerings that add layers and layers. We were just having this conversation earlier. Layers and layers of abstractions in front of your technology, with the promises that you just write a few lines of YAML and the rest will magically unfold. So we've experimented with that because we wanted to try it out ourselves. But again, we found that the more abstractions you have, the more bloat it adds, and the more disconnected you become from your own software. And if you do not have a really deep understanding, a really tight control of the software that you offer, let's say our trading platform and all the associated services, that can become significantly detrimental to the business itself. So there was a period when we experimented with Kubernetes K8s. Nothing against K8s, it just didn't work out. We found it to be extremely complicated. When you self-host software, it's important to really master it. It's important to understand its tiniest nuances to figure out how it works, how it doesn't work, when it chokes. You have to understand it all. And we found that K8s was a huge black box, which we struggled to understand. We piloted it, then we objectively discarded it. So today we use Nomad. We've been experimenting with Nomad for a while, and the whole infrastructure as code thing, I think we've hit like a middle ground where the code that you write for infrastructure is really simple. It's something that a new developer can just sit down, read and understand, let's say 20 lines of configuration. And how your application is deployed within your stack is also really, really visible. It's not hidden behind black boxes. So that's a principle that we value greatly, simplicity. Sometimes all it takes is a bash script. Sometimes it's a PHP script, or sometimes it's a massive database. It doesn't matter, but it has to work, and one has to have full control over it. And this has been our thought process since 2013. And stock markets is a really weird place. Everything is absolutely unpredictable. Markets can go up or down, and any financial services organization in capital markets is heavily bound to the trajectory of the market. You can build the best software, you can build the best trading platforms out there, but none of that would matter if stock markets aren't performing. People just will not come use your software. Software here is really secondary. Money is primary. So thankfully, from the very beginning, from the get-go, we figured this simple fact out that if people aren't really making money in capital markets, all software, all technology, all stacks, they're all meaningless. So that, again, gave us the privilege and luxury of being able to do things really, really, really slowly. So what happened in 2020 when COVID happened, when the lockdowns were announced, was an extreme anomaly, probably once in a century event, especially in capital markets. To illustrate this, I'll cite some numbers. In January 2020, we were handling up to 2 million orders in a day. In March, when the lockdowns happened, a week after the lockdowns happened, we were handling 8 million orders a day. And that was a 5x jump in a matter of 8 weeks, completely unexpected. So there was no time to scale infrastructure, change your systems, rewire your systems, change everything. Let go of everything that you know about markets, about business expectations, about technology and stack, and to scale. But scale we did. And we still really wonder about it because, like I said, it was an anomaly. It happened overnight, 2 million to 8 million orders. And 6 weeks later, we were doing 10 million orders. And 6 weeks later, we were doing 12 million orders a day. But our infrastructure didn't change. We didn't have to provision additional hardware. Our tech team was at 30 people. It's still at 30 people. We didn't have to explode in terms of headcount. And nothing really changed. And everything really just largely worked out. Of course, we had to fine-tune a few knobs here and there. But it all really worked, and it just unfolded. And then we reflected and figured that all the tiny decisions, all these decisions based on conviction that we'd taken over a decade of the decision to never be reliant on external parties for critical things, the decision to master a database before using it, the decision not to use managed services because we really wanted to understand how Stack works. These are all decisions that can sometimes slow progress down, but then the definition of progress itself changes when an anomaly like this happens. So we've often stopped and paused working on new things just to fix old things or address technical debt. So we realized that what happened in 2020 was the culmination of like 1 million tiny little common sense decisions that we had taken in the past several years. And when we took those decisions, we were never aiming for a 5x growth. We've never looked for 1 million users. We've never looked for millions of orders, none of those things. It all really happened because when we did technology, we did it the common sense way. We kept external dependencies to an absolute minimum. We did not introduce bloat or black boxes into our software. When we wrote software, we wrote simple software and used well-known battle-tested FOSS like Postgres and Redis. These things just work beautifully. And everything just really paid off when the time came. And this was a lesson that we learned in hindsight, but when we were doing it, it wasn't really, like I said, with a specific goal. It was just common sense. So, and now this kind of has become a talking point. Zerodha is a successful organization, thankfully. We are profitable, we are bootstrapped, but that Zerodha's tech team is really small, and we manage a lot of really large, complex systems, has now become a talking point in the industry. So I keep getting questioned about the size of our tech team. I keep getting questioned about how we use FOSS. And recently I had a conversation with 2 big banks, and 2 big banks who are reeling under pressure from exorbitant licensing fees. This is licensing fees to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars per year, purely in licensing, because it's somebody else's technology and they can ask for whatever. So even large banks are taking active steps into migrating away from external dependencies and licensing, and they're setting up FOSS shops, as they call it. They're setting up tech teams who only look at open source systems, battle-tested systems. I know that they're looking at Postgres. I know that they're looking at ClickHouse. And everybody, even the really large legacy non-technical institutions, are trying to bring technological capacity and infrastructure in-house using common sense. That's a great sign, and that's an amazing move for the open source world also, because hopefully we'll also start seeing more corporate funding come into open source projects. But the one thing I again get asked is, despite this awareness that you have to self-host and be in control of your destiny using FOSS, the first question, again, always is maintenance. How do you maintain? Who will take responsibility for the maintenance or the running or the operations of a Postgres database or a Redis instance? That is what everyone's worried about. And from our experience, maintenance is really a boogeyman at this point. Maybe 10 years ago, maybe in the last decade, it mattered. Maybe you had to log into your servers and tune your databases every day. That's not true anymore. In this decade, most well-built FOSS just runs beautifully forever. Like I said, we have Redis instances that have been running for years, 4-5 years. We have Postgres instances that have not been restarted in many years. These are multi-terabyte databases. We have a Nadh stream instance that's been running for 4 years. These things just work. And if you're worrying about maintenance, it's probably largely ignorance and the lack of experience self-hosting. And it's a vicious cycle. The more you do not own and self-host your technology, the more you can't self-host your technology. And culturally, especially non-technical institutions have always liked someone to shift blame to. When a system goes down, when something goes wrong, you can always just point the fingers at the contractor to whom you're paying millions of dollars and shift responsibility there. But I think that time has passed. Technology is also becoming increasingly legislative. In our industry, capital markets, SEBI, our capital markets regulator, has come up with guidelines where institutions will have to start paying penalties for technical glitches. Every time there's a glitch, and the definition for glitch is very broad, you have to report within an hour. So that time, that era where you could just blame somebody else saying, oh, there's a problem with the vendor is gone, and there'll be legal responsibility that organizations are supposed to take. So the organization will be slapped with when it comes to issues with their technology stack. And that means organizations who use and offer technology, which is everyone, it used to be tech-enabled, then it became tech-first. Today, a bank is also looked upon as a technology organization. A stockbroker is looked upon as a technology organization. So there's no escaping from it anymore. Everybody is a first-party technology company, and it is also going to be ratified in legality. So organizations who do not own and understand their tech stacks are going to be in trouble for sure. And even the idea of, I have 5 more minutes, I think. Yeah. Even the, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. It's all right. Yeah, even vendors, even managed services, there's going to be legislation coming soon where organizations will be held responsible for the number of dependencies they have. We know of organizations, especially in the financial sector, who have like 150, 200 IT vendors. To manage their vendors, they have to go to another vendor and get a vendor management software. That's how complex it is. And there's soon going to be regulations that clamp down on the number of external dependencies you have, the number of external dependencies and technology providers that you can offload your responsibilities to. So what used to be really hobby and how we operate, we still see this from a very first hacker's perspective, is going to be legal very soon. And it's going to be a big wake-up call for a lot of organizations. Coming back to the fun and hobby aspect, the great thing about self-hosting open source systems is that the capacity, the learnings that you gain from it not only becomes integral to your business, it becomes your moat. It also plays a really, really critical role in the capacity building and skilling of the developers in a tech team itself. So many of the systems that we use at work, many of the systems that we fine-tuned and maintained and mastered are also systems that we take back and use in our own hobby projects. Karan, for example, in a tech team, runs a Raspberry Pi cluster with like a Nomad cluster on it, deploying his workloads. Even it could be a static web page, but it's fun. So the line between serious work, serious technology work in a workplace and having fun as a hobbyist developer, as a technologist, really blurs in a good way. Because it's the same technology, it's the same expertise that you're able to transfer from context to context, organization to organizations, hobby to work. In 2019, at Zerodha, we ran into this really big bottleneck of not being able to email our clients. We are required by regulations to get emails delivered to millions of our clients within a stipulated time. So we exhausted all possible open source mailing list managers that were out there. And I tried to tackle this by writing a piece of software from scratch. It became a hobby project, and it grew. It's a project that I still maintain actively, ListMonk. And we use it at Zerodha, at our workplace, to send out like 200 million emails every month. And again, ListMonk is self-hosted on an EC2 instance, on a tiny EC2 instance. The emails that have to go out have to hit an SMTP server. We don't trust external SMTP providers, so we self-host Haraka, which is an open source SMTP provider. And the cost is peanuts. The amount of money we spend on sending out hundreds of millions of emails is just a couple $100. And we know that others in the industry who've gone on to rely on really big email providers spend millions of dollars on it. And we spend a couple $100 every month. So self-hosting is not just blind philosophical conviction. It's not just hobby. It is serious financial viability. And the fact that we self-host and manage all our systems at Zerodha contributes significantly to our profit margins. And when you self-host, you get to have fun in absurd ways. I'll cite one example. As I said, we are heavy users of Postgres. We have a Postgres instance where up to 10 million tables are created in a single day and scrapped. It's a hack that we came up with. We have humongous Postgres databases from which we have to extract financial reports on demand when users come, click, and request on those reports. So this is like an intermediary cache layer where all the queries are queued as jobs. It's an open source system that we've built called SQL Jobber. So the results still have to be sorted. They have to be queryable. The users still have to filter them on the front end. So it's not ideal to cache the results as a blob. So instead, the results that come from larger databases, we create a table in real time fitting those results and dump them in a cache table, which is a Postgres instance. 10 plus million tables at the end of the day. It works beautifully, zero maintenance, problem solved, caching solved, no external headaches. So there are so many such instances where it has serious positive business impact. It is serious amounts of fun, and it's a win-win. You gain mastery, you learn, it helps a technologist, and it really helps the business. And on a parting note, and as I said earlier, we have 30 people in the tech team, and 30 people build and manage all of these things. We manage multi-terabyte database instances, we manage concurrency, we manage millions of users, we manage self-host and manage our SMTP servers, our HR and payroll and employee leave systems. If 30 people can do so many things, that is only because there's high-quality open source software out there which is self-hostable and self-manageable easily. And if it wasn't for that, we as an organization would not exist. So it's absolutely important to do this. If you're not doing this, try this out. And of course, to support the projects that enable this. We've started, ever since we became successful as a business, we've been donating to all the open source projects that have helped us. We've set up an open source software foundation here that aids projects here. So just little things that we attempt to do, but really, I mean, if we never self-hosted FOSS, we wouldn't exist. I can say that with conviction. So thank you.
If you have any questions, Dr. Kailash would be pleased to answer those.
Thank you. Hello, good morning. I just have one question. So let's suppose you have some enhancement that you want to do, which are currently in the product backlog, But let's suppose tomorrow SEBI comes up with some compliance requirements, then how do you deal with such scenarios?
You have to listen to them. So all your business plans, in this industry, all your business plans, everything is secondary, regulatory compliance is primary. So we could have a grand plan to build something out, but if SEBI comes and says, change this other thing, you have to pause and stop everything and change that other thing. There's no other way.
Yeah, but for that you must have like some reusable or like the software divided into multiple modules, which is easily modifiable and not a kind of a monolith kind of thing. I mean, yeah.
Absolutely. So if your software, your architecture, your organization, your business processes are not modular, you can't, it's very difficult to survive. And I said earlier, self-hosting force here is key because SEBI can come and change the way you work completely overnight. And if you have to rely on dozens of vendors, raise tickets with vendors, chase them to get changes made, it's impossible. The only reason why we are able to comply so easily, the only reason why we have this regulatory agility is because we have complete and total control over our infrastructure and stack. And if we don't like a system, an open source system, we can throw it out and get something else in. We don't have to, we are not at the mercy of, let's say, dozens and dozens of external dependencies.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi. Hi, good morning. So my question is, since we know that India financial capital markets being highly regulated by SEBI, financial services companies like Zerodha and other, so what is your take on, modernizing your applications or modernizing your tech stacks in line with the latest, developments out there in market?
I didn't catch the last bit.
So your take as a CTO, as a co-founder for a financial organization in this heavily regulated market, what would be your take on modernizing your tech stack or, tech stack of any financial company for that matter?
My take on the tech stacks generally used?
Modernizing the application stack.
I don't think it's right to appropriate to take a top-down view. As in, I don't think it's possible to go to a bank and say that this is old, you should use this. I think, as I said, after a certain point of organizational growth, more than technology, it really becomes the nuances, complexities, people problems, processes that are embedded. So I wouldn't really have an ideal tech stack in mind. It has to be on a case-by-case basis. Every organization will probably end up with a different tech stack that embodies their problems, their culture. So I wouldn't be able to suggest an ideal tech stack. It has to be evaluated objectively per organization.
It was really great to hear that your techs are up and running for years and years together, Postgres, Redis, and all of that. But at the same time, I would curious to know, is it really running, or it's running at a high availability solution? Because there would be vulnerabilities that would creep in on the OS, on the database, and we'll have to deal with it, right? We cannot be running up and running for 4 years, 5 years practically. So just wanted to understand that part.
See, risk is also a gradient. There can be air-gapped systems that are completely disjoint from all your other networks, the internet, or any user-facing hot paths that can be maintained safely. So just because there's always a patch available, that installing a patch secures you, that's not exactly how it really works. So of course, everything that faces risk has to be changed and upgraded, but there are certain systems that are so disconnected from everything else, they're free to run for a long time. So risk analysis that way is a gradient.
I guess Dr. Kailash is around for some more time, right?
Yeah.
At the conference. So please feel free to interact with him on this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the amazing insights.
Thank you.